Hello and welcome back. We're going to talk about expressions now in PHP and how these things work together. And so there's a lots of things in the PHP language that work like every other language. Plus, multiplication is asterisk, etc., etc. But the one thing, and I'll talk about this a bunch of times as we go through this. The one thing that I think charming, delightful, and weird about PHP is how aggressive it is with type conversion. So here we have a plus, and in some languages that might seem like concatenation. And plus is an arithmetic operator in PHP, and it looks to its left and looks to its right and says, hey, I got the string 15 and I'm going to add it to the integer 27. You know, I'll just silently convert that 15 to a number for you. Away we go. So that's 42. And so most people would look at that. In most programming languages, self-respecting programming languages, that would blow up, right? But not in PHP. Because I guess you meant to do that. If you typed it, you meant to do that. So expressions are things that turn into a value, whether it's a string, a number, a floating point number, a true, false, Boolean, and you can call functions during the order of during the evaluation, etc. And they can also produce like arrays and other things. So some operators of note. We'll talk about these: the post increment and post decrement. They're subtle operators that are used in a few very specific places. String concatenation, which I love, but no other language. Equality, there's double equal sign, because assignment is equals. It's too late for that. We have too many programming languages that use double equals for the equals question, right? Equality is when you're asking a question. Is this equal to, is $X, is that equal to 14? That's a question, right? That's the true false. And $X equals 14 means put 14 into the variable $X. Identity, we'll talk about this. It's the stronger than equality. It's equal in both type and value. Equality is also an aggressively converting operator. It's saying, like, if I can convert these two things, I got a string on one side and a number on another side, I can make them equal. I will make them equal, and then give you a true false as to whether it's true. The ternary operator, most people think the ternary operator is tacky, and I agree with that, but I have to show it to you because there's a couple of places where we canonically use the ternary operator over and over and over again, and so you've got to be able to look at that code and understand it. So again, side effect operators, again, one of these things where we try to avoid them in decent code, but every once in a while they are canonically used, so I have to talk about this. The bitwise operators come from C, and they work pretty much the same as C, unless you're writing like an encryption bit or a hashing function. You tend not to need those, but they're there in case you need to write a hashing function or an encryption function. So the increment and decrement operators, there's pre-versions of these in Post where you can put either the plus plus after a variable, here, $X plus plus. What this says is retrieve it, and after it's retrieved, increment it. So it's like pull the variable out and then add one to the variable that's sitting there in memory. And again, other than in certain canonical situations like for loops, we don't write this. We just write, x equals x plus 1 instead. You say, okay, look, if I really want to add 1 to x, I will bust this out, and I will pull the variable x out in one expression, and then I'll add x equals x plus 1. There's this sort of notion in programming that you just don't show off. You're like, ooh, watch the really crazy little thing I can do to confuse you, because the reader of the program needs to be able to parse and understand what you've done. PHP really does not care the difference between this set of code and this set of code, right? 30 years ago, there might be a performance difference between this set of code and this set of code, but today I assure you there's no performance difference, and this is easy for humans to understand, so we tend to not do this. Bad. Except later when I'll tell you it's okay. So whatever, there's rules, mostly bad, most of the time bad, most of the time do this. But you're going to see code. You're going to see code. And so I got to show you the kinds of things that you're going to see code so you understand it. I don't want you like, whoa! I look in some code and like, Chuck didn't explain that. So I feel this need. Okay. Here's one of the things I love about PHP, but like I said, it'll never get to any other language because they always use the dot operator for object orientation, which whatever, we got it. So dot is concatenation, and it is not just concatenation, it is string concatenation, which means it looks to its left, looks to its right. Now these are both strings, and if those aren't strings, it turns things into strings, like floating point numbers, etc., etc. And so it's an aggressively type converting operator. So one thing I like about PHP is the operators have an opinion, and they're going to, you know, the plus operator in Python concatenating a, well, you have to convert everything, so it's deterministic. But these just aggressively do type conversion. Now, the other thing to note on here is this little space is why this space. This dot does not add a space. The dot does not add a space. So if you want a space, you've got to add it explicitly. The ternary operator. Just don't write code except in the one place that I'll show you later. Don't write code like this generally. And as a matter of fact, in PHP 7, there is the null coalescing operator, which I'm not covering here, the double question mark operator. And when I re-record this in 2 or 3 more years, then I will not even mention the ternary operator. But the problem is that we are somewhere between PHP 5 and PHP 7. And this works in both PHP 5 and 7, and I am forever torn when I write code for other people to use whether I should just like start using PHP 7. It's too early, but in a couple of years there will be time, and then we will all use PHP 7, and we will use the null coalescing operator. So go look up null coalescing, and if you decide that you want to write uniquely PHP 7 code, that's fine. For me, for now, I'm going to keep using the ternary operator and is null, etc. So okay. So this ternary operator, like I said, in the future we won't have to use it, but for now you're going to see code for decades that has this in it. So you got to think of this ternary operator as this is an expression. I'll put parentheses around it, and it's going to produce a value. Some value is going to be stuck into this variable when it's all said and done. And you can think of this as one of these two things is going to get put in, and there's a question mark that decides which is going to happen. I should probably have a bigger screen for this. Right, so think of it's like this assignment statement has these two things in flight, and then we're going to make a decision as to which one makes it. And this question mark is this bit right here. So you could think of these as it's like an assignment statement, but only one of these two things is going to make it, based on whether it's true or false. And this is a question. So you have a question followed by the question mark, followed by the value that the assignment statement is going to get if it's true or false. And it's not really an assignment statement, it's this expression on this right-hand side. So if we look at this code, what this is saying is it is going to assign large into message if www is greater than 100. And it's going to assign small into this message if it not, but that's not going to work. So it's going to end up with large. Okay. Here we're looking for an even number. If it's evenly divisible by 2, meaning it has no remainder, then it's an even number or an odd number. And so 123 is odd. And this is how we check for an odd number, and I actually use modulo to check for even and odd numbers all the time. Side effect assignment. Again, these are simple contractions. We find ourselves, especially like when I'm creating SQL statements in PHP, concatenating by appending to the end of a line. And so we write code, so we start with a string, and then we like add a blank to it. And we, so the out equals hello, and then out equals out concatenated with another blank. And so this is a contraction, right? And so what happens is you can say out dot equals, and that says concatenate with myself, right? And so it's called a side effect assignment, in that this out is sort of on both the left and the right side of the assignment statement, meaning that this is out equals out concatenated with world. This is out equals out concatenated with \n. And so it's like hello world, right? And so you can do this with addition as well. This is concatenation operator. You can do it with addition operator. Again, I don't like doing this. I do this as long as I'm going to do it for sort of more than a couple of lines. And you'll see code that I've written that I'm doing like concatenate, 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 concatenate. And I don't bother using this whole thing. If I'm only going to do one line, I might not use that. But again, you're going to see it. So again, use them sparingly. Pick your moments when you're going to use these things. I mentioned that PHP has aggressive type conversion. It's at times humorous when it gets a little too aggressive in its type conversion. And so the operators in PHP and the equality operators in PHP, they're sort of like trying to get to a point where they can achieve what you've told them to do. They don't want to give up. And you can do this explicitly if you want. Other languages like Python and Java and C demand that you do this explicitly. So here we go with some fun stuff. So division forces a floating point number. Division forces a floating point number, so that's good. Python 3 forces a floating point number as well. Here's a kind of freaky thing. The string 100 plus 36.5 plus true. True turns into a 1. So this, it says, oh, I'm going to do some addition here. This turns into the number 100. It converts that to a float. So that ends up being 137.25. So there you go. Now we can use a casting operator like this and force that to be a string, but it really doesn't matter because this is going to force it to be a string anyways, and the dot is a string operator. You can also sort of cast this into a 9.9 to an int, which is going to truncate it, and so that's going to be 9 minus 1, which gives us the 8. And then, again, the string operation that we have here is converting this 100 so that it can turn it to 136.25. But if we get a string that's not a number, it's not even an error. So Sam plus 25 is 25. So this, if this doesn't convert, that's not really a traceback. That's not an error. That turns into a 0. So that's why this is 25. And the concatenation is like, oh, I got an integer over here. I'll convert that to a string. So that gives us the string Sam25. And so you kind of see how these operators, like, you told it to do it, it's going to do it. If it can find a way to do it, it would rather do what you said, even though you might be crazy. It's not making a value judgment. It's not like, whoa, that's crazy. Why'd you even do that? So this, if we compare this to Python, you know, we do these concatenations, and when in Python we have to be really explicit. So because we don't have a separate concatenation operator, so we have to convert things to string, we have to convert things to integer, and you know, so that's sort of the key difference, is that in PHP it tries to guess what you meant, and it just goes ahead and does what it is that you meant. True becomes 1, so here we're concatenating a string x, string y with the variable, the constant true, which is a Boolean variable. True becomes 1, false becomes 0, but if it's being concatenated with a string, false is nothing. Some of my most frustrating time debugging PHP is when I'm printing debugging output, and I print a variable and it's got false in it, and I can't see it because false is basically invisible. Okay? So equality versus identity. The double equal operator is a type converting operator, and it's aggressive in its type conversion. So if we look at this bit of code right here, it looks at the 123 and the string 123, and it converts that to a number before it does the equality. So this becomes true. If we see this 100 plus 23, which is a string, that's also true. Here we have false. I think the 0 becomes the Boolean, and that becomes true. And this one here is kind of crazy in that 5 is less than 6 becomes a true, which becomes a 1 in this equality. And then the string 2 minus the string 1, these get turned into integers, and that becomes a 1. And so this overall question mark becomes true. Okay, and so that is the equality operator, and it's really trying to aggressively convert its operands to figure this stuff out. And if 5 is less than 6 is triple equal true. Triple equals is equal in type and value. So it's equal with no conversion, basically. And so the 5 less than 6 is a true, and this is a true on that side. So this also evaluates to true. Okay. So identity is really important. They talk about it even in the documentation because functions sometimes return false as an indicator that something either went wrong or whatever. In the case of stirpose, which is looking for a string within another string, it returns false if it didn't find it. Sometimes this would return -1 in some languages, but it returns false. And the problem is false can be converted to 0. So you can't, to tell the difference between the string matching on the first character, which is the 0th character, and not matching at all, you have to use the triple equals operator. And so even in the documentation, it's reminding you, use the triple equals operator. So for me, I always use the triple equals operator if I'm using true or false, and later we'll learn about null. These are predefined constants that can be turned into numbers so easily because true turns into 1, false turns into 0, and null turns into 0 in anything that might want to compare integers. And so that's really dangerous. And so we just use triple equals. Don't overuse triple equals, just use it when you need it. And so here's some examples of what works and what doesn't work with triple equals. So we'll use stirpose as the example. And so we're going to look to see if the letter W, the string WO is in hello world. And so it tells us that that starts at position 6, and strings are 0 based, and so that's position 6. Where's HE? Well, that's in position 0. And here's the one that kind of drives me nuts. If you say, where is the letters ZZ in this string, that's going to return false. But look what we see. We see nothing. I have stared at lines of code like this for a long time. So always just in the back of your mind when you're doing PHP, say that echo doesn't show false. Var dump, var underscore dump, which we'll see in a bit when we get to arrays, does show false. So just know that false doesn't print. True turns into 1. False doesn't print. Okay, so here we have the problem where we need to use the triple equals. So if we say, oh, is the string, this is asking where is it, and this is going to be in position 0 because HE is the first character there. And we're asking, is it false? But we're using double equals. So that's going to do type conversion. It's going to see an integer on one side, and false will be turned into a 0, and it's going to become true. Yeah, it's not false, right? And so, we're going to get the wrong answer, basically. And so this will give us the right answer because this is going to return false, and false is equal to false. And so this just says that when you're comparing with false or true, you use triple equal. And so this basically will give us 0 on this side because that's where it's founded, and not triple equals, it's not, and so it's going to be there. And then and then this is going to give us back false, and the triple equals is not going to convert that, and so that's going to make this thing be false. I mean, that's going to make this thing be true, and so it's going to give us the right answer. And here we go. You can't use print, you can't use echo, you can't use print R, which we'll use when we get to arrays. None of these things show false. Only thing does is var dump. That shows if you do a variable, you will see false. So remember that. And use, when you're really stuck debugging, use var dump as it's ugly output and it's not pretty, but you can't always find false when you need to. So up next, we're going to talk about control structures, ifs and fors, etc.